Disclaimer: this video examines investigative procedures and forensic analysis based on public records and official documents. Out of respect for those affected, certain details have been omitted. Our focus is on systemic questions, not speculation. Federal authorities are calling it a case that changed missing persons investigations forever. The Gabby Petito case presents a timeline that reveals critical failures in domestic violence response. The Gabby Petito case has every type of documentation. A 22-year-old woman disappeared during a cross-country road trip with her fiancé. Her social media documented their journey. Police body cam footage captured a domestic incident. Yet she was killed before authorities intervened effectively. Right now, evidence of a pattern that was missed. A documented domestic dispute on August 12, 2021. Concerning social media silence starting August 25th, a missing person report filed September 11th, a body discovered September 19th. Authorities detected warning signs during a police stop in Moab, Utah. Something captured on body cam footage that would later be scrutinized by millions. Gabby Petito was documenting her life on social media. She posted regularly on Instagram and YouTube about her van life journey with her fiancé, Brian Laundrie. Then the posts stopped. Her family couldn't reach her. Her fiancé returned home to Florida without her and refused to cooperate with police. The timeline from last contact to discovery was 25 days. The search that followed engaged thousands of law enforcement personnel, volunteers, and online investigators across multiple states. The FBI attributes the resolution of this case partially to massive public engagement driven by social media attention, something that highlighted disparities in how missing persons cases receive resources and media coverage. Even more disturbing, police had an opportunity to intervene during the documented domestic incident, but classified it as a mental health crisis rather than recognizing the dynamics of domestic violence. The Gabby Petito case broke national conversations about domestic violence recognition, missing white woman syndrome, and the role of social media in modern investigations. Here's what exposes systemic problems. A domestic incident is documented on body cam but not treated as high risk. A woman goes missing during a trip with her partner who then refuses to speak to police. That partner is not immediately treated as a primary suspect, and the case only receives massive resources after it becomes a media sensation. What does this say about how we handle domestic violence and missing persons? Think about that. Before we dive deeper into this investigation, if you want to understand how this case changed law enforcement approaches to domestic violence and missing persons, make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. Because what we're about to examine will show you the gaps in our systems that cost Gabby Petito her life. And drop a comment telling us, what should police have done differently during that traffic stop in Utah? Let's talk about Gabby Petito. Born March 19, 1999, in Blue Point, New York. 22 years old in 2021. She worked as a pharmacy technician and had ambitions of building a social media presence focused on travel and van life. She had been in a relationship with Brian Laundrie since high school. They got engaged in 2020. By early 2021, they had decided to embark on a cross-country road trip in a converted van, documenting their journey on social media. This wasn't unusual for their generation. Van life had become a massive trend on Instagram and YouTube. Thousands of young people were converting vans and traveling the country, documenting their adventures for followers. Brian Laundrie, born November 18, 1997, 23 years old in 2021. He had been Gabby's boyfriend and fiancé for years. They lived together in Florida with Brian's parents in North Port, a city on the Gulf Coast south of Tampa. The relationship appeared normal to outsiders and on social media, though later information would reveal tensions and conflicts that weren't publicly visible during the relationship. July 2, 2021. Gabby and Brian depart from Florida in a white 2012 Ford Transit van that they had converted into a camper. The conversion was modest but functional. A bed platform, some storage, basic camping equipment. Nothing elaborate, but enough for two people to travel and camp across the country. Their plan was to travel across the United States, visiting national parks and scenic locations, documenting the journey on Gabby's Instagram account, which had the handle of Gabs Petito, and their YouTube channel called Nomadic Static. The goal was to build a social media following and potentially turn travel vlogging into a career or at least a source of income. This was an increasingly common aspiration among young people in the social media age. The early part of the trip appears completely normal based on social media posts. Photos from various locations across the South, videos showing the van, campsite setups, scenic views. Gabby posts regularly to Instagram. Her captions are upbeat and enthusiastic. Everything appears fine to her followers and to her family back home. The couple travels through the South, heading west through Texas, then north toward Colorado and Utah, heading to national parks and wilderness areas. The posts show what looked like an idyllic adventure, beautiful landscapes, the couple together in photos, smiling, Gabby's photography skills improving as the trip progresses, comments from followers expressing envy and encouragement. This was the dream that van life social media had sold to a generation. Freedom, adventure, escaping the 9-to-5 grind, living simply and experiencing nature. On the surface, Gabby and Brian were living that dream. But here's where everything starts to go wrong. August 12th, 2021, Moab, Utah. Around 4:30 p.m., a 911 call is placed by a witness named Christopher. He reports seeing a man, later identified as Brian Laundrie, slapping and hitting a woman, later identified as Gabby Petito, outside a grocery store cooperative called Moonflower Community Cooperative in downtown Moab. The witness describes seeing the man strike the woman multiple times. He describes the woman appearing distressed. The witness provides a description of the vehicle, a white van with Florida plates. The 911 call audio would later be released publicly, and the caller sounds genuinely concerned for the woman's safety. Moab Police Department responds to the call. Officers begin searching for the described vehicle. At approximately 4:40 p.m., officers locate a white Ford Transit van matching the description driving on Highway 191 near the entrance to Arches National Park, just outside Moab city limits. The van is driving erratically, touching the center line and the fog line on the right side of the road. Officers initiate a traffic stop. Two Moab police officers, Eric Pratt and Daniel Robbins, make contact with the vehicle's occupants. The entire interaction that follows is recorded on police body cam footage from both officers. This footage, over an hour long, would later be released to the public and would be analyzed by millions of people, dissected by domestic violence experts, and ultimately become one of the most scrutinized pieces of police body cam footage in recent history. The body cam footage begins with officers approaching the van. Brian Laundrie is driving. Gabby Petito is in the passenger seat. Brian is asked to step out of the vehicle. He complies immediately. He appears calm, cooperative, even friendly with the officers. He's wearing a t-shirt and shorts. He has some visible scratches on his right arm and on his face near his eye. Gabby is then asked to step out of the vehicle and speak with the other officer separately. This is when the footage becomes difficult to watch. Gabby is visibly and extremely distressed. She's crying intensely, hyperventilating, struggling to catch her breath. Her hands are shaking. She's apologizing repeatedly. She appears to be in a state of emotional crisis. The officer tries to calm her down, asking her to take deep breaths, offering her water. Once Gabby begins to calm slightly, the officer asks what happened. Gabby explains, through tears and obvious anxiety, that she and Brian had been arguing. She describes the stress of traveling together in close quarters for weeks. She describes her own struggles with OCD and anxiety. She admits that during the argument she hit Brian. She slapped him. She takes full responsibility for the physical altercation. She's clearly very upset about her own behavior and seems deeply ashamed that she hit him. Meanwhile, the other officer is speaking with Brian separately. Brian's demeanor is completely different. He's calm. He speaks in measured tones. He explains that they've been on the road for months and tensions have been building. He says Gabby has anxiety issues. He says she got upset about something minor, him tracking dirt into the van, and it escalated into an argument. He shows the scratches on his arm and face. He says Gabby scratched him and hit him during the argument. He doesn't want to press charges. He just wants to continue their trip. The officers confer. They review Utah's domestic violence laws. Under Utah law, if there's evidence of physical violence in a domestic relationship, officers are required to determine who was the primary aggressor and make an arrest if probable cause exists. The officer's assessment, based on the visible injuries on Brian, the lack of visible injuries on Gabby, Gabby's admission that she struck Brian, and her highly emotional state compared to his calm demeanor, is that Gabby was the primary aggressor in this incident. However, the officers also recognize that both individuals are clearly stressed, that emotions are running high, and that separating them for the night might be the best way to prevent further conflict. Utah law allows officers discretion in domestic violence cases to classify them differently if circumstances warrant. The officers decide to classify this as a mental health crisis and disorderly conduct rather than domestic violence. They decide not to make an arrest. Instead, they propose a solution. Brian will get a hotel room in Moab for the night. The officers even offer to help pay for it. Gabby will keep the van and can camp somewhere for the night. The idea is to give both of them space to cool down and rest, and they can continue their trip the next day with clearer heads. Both Gabby and Brian agree to this plan. The officers spend significant time talking with both of them. They're trying to be helpful. They're trying to diffuse the situation. They share their own experiences with relationships and stress. They try to give advice. Their intentions appear genuine. They seem to want to help this young couple work through a rough patch. At the end of the stop, no citations are issued. No arrests are made. Brian is dropped off at a hotel. Gabby drives away in the van. The officers close out the call and move on to other duties. This decision, made with apparently good intentions, would be heavily scrutinized after Gabby's death just weeks later. Domestic violence experts who reviewed the Bodycam footage after the tragedy identified numerous red flags that the officers missed or misinterpreted. But before we get into that analysis, let's continue with what happened next. August 12th, evening. Brian stays at a hotel as instructed. Gabby has the van. The next morning, August 13th, they reunite and continue their trip together. Over the next week and a half, they continue traveling through Utah. Gabby's Instagram posts during this period continue, but become noticeably less frequent. Her captions become shorter. Some posts seem to be older photos being posted days later based on location tags not matching up with the timeline. Family members, specifically Gabby's mother, Nicole Schmidt, and her stepfather, Jim Schmidt, continue receiving texts and occasional calls from Gabby during this period. However, in retrospect, they would describe some of these communications as seeming slightly off. The tone was different. Some word choices were unusual for how Gabby normally spoke, but at the time, they didn't think too much of it. Travel is stressful. Maybe she was just tired or dealing with typical trip challenges. August 24th, 2021. Gabby and Brian check into a hotel in Salt Lake City, Utah. This is documented through hotel records that would later be obtained by investigators. They stay one night. This is the last confirmed sighting of Gabby alive by anyone other than Brian. Witnesses at the hotel, interviewed later by investigators, described seeing the couple but noted nothing unusual about their behavior or appearance. August 25th, 2021, Gabby FaceTimes with her mother, Nicole Schmidt. This is the last confirmed visual contact between Gabby and her family. During the call, Gabby appears to be in a good mood, according to her mother's recollection. They discuss the trip. Gabby mentions they're leaving Utah and heading to Grand Teton National Park in Wyoming. She's excited to see the Tetons and visit Yellowstone. The call ends normally. Nicole has no indication that anything is wrong. This would be the last time Nicole saw her daughter's face. August 27th, 2021. A text message is sent from Gabby's phone to her mother. The message reads, "Can you help Stan? I just keep getting his voicemails and missed calls." The message is referring to Gabby's grandfather. However, Nicole immediately finds this message odd. Gabby never called her grandfather Stan. She always called him by his actual name or grandpa. The word choice is uncharacteristic. Nicole texts back, asking questions but receives no response. She tries calling Gabby's phone multiple times over the next day. The calls go to voicemail. August 30th, 2021. Another text is sent from Gabby's phone to Nicole. The message reads, "No service in Yosemite." This message sets off alarm bells for Nicole. She's fairly certain, based on previous conversations, that Gabby had no plans to go to Yosemite National Park, which is in California. The last she knew, Gabby was heading to Wyoming. Why would she suddenly be in California? The message doesn't make sense. Nicole tries calling again. No answer. She tries texting Brian's phone. No response. She's now genuinely worried that something is wrong. Nicole's concern is based not just on the strange messages, but on the silence that follow. Gabby usually responds to her mother within hours, even if she's busy or in areas with poor cell service. Complete silence for days is not normal for their relationship. Nicole discusses her concerns with her husband, Jim. They decide to wait a bit longer before taking action, hoping Gabby will make contact. But as days pass with no word, their worry intensifies. And then something that shouldn't exist appears. September 1st, 2021. Brian Laundrie arrives back at his parents' home at 2126 Wabasso Avenue in Northport, Florida. He's driving Gabby's white Ford Transit van. He arrives alone. Gabby is not with him. He does not report her missing to any law enforcement agency. He does not contact Gabby's family to explain where she is or what happened. He simply returns to his parents' house and stays there. Over the next several days, Gabby's family desperately tries to make contact. Nicole calls Gabby's phone repeatedly. Voicemail. She calls Brian's phone. No answer. She calls Brian's parents' home phone. No answer. She sends texts to both Gabby and Brian. No responses. She reaches out to Brian's parents through every means available. She calls them. She texts them. She sends messages through social media. She's pleading for any information about where her daughter is. Complete silence from the Laundrie family. September 10th. Nicole Schmidt receives a text from Brian Laundrie's mother, Roberta Laundrie. The text does not provide any information about Gabby's whereabouts. Instead, it suggests that Nicole stop trying to contact them. The tone is dismissive. This is the only communication the Laundries provide, despite Nicole's increasing desperation. September 11th, 2021. 10 days after Brian returned to Florida without Gabby, and after repeated failed attempts to get any information from Brian or his family, Nicole Schmidt files an official missing person report with the Northport Police Department. She reports that her daughter, Gabby Petito, has been missing since late August, that Gabby's fiancé, Brian Laundrie, has returned from their trip without her, that he is refusing to communicate about her whereabouts, and that his family is also refusing to provide any information. Northport police respond immediately to the missing person report. They attempt to make contact with Brian Laundrie at his parents' residence. Officers go to the house. They knock on the door. Someone inside refuses to open the door. Through the door, the officers are told that the Laundrie family has retained an attorney and will not be making any statements. The officers are given the attorney's contact information and told to direct all inquiries to the attorney. The attorney, Stephen Bertolino, releases a statement on behalf of the Laundrie family. The statement says, in effect, that the Laundrie family has been advised not to speak about Gabby's disappearance and will not be cooperating with the investigation at this time. The statement offers no information about Gabby's whereabouts. It offers no explanation for Brian's return without her. It offers no assistance to the search efforts. It simply asserts their Fifth Amendment right to remain silent. Here are the facts that don't close. Brian Laundrie was the last person known to be with Gabby Petito. He returned from their road trip driving her van. She's not with him. Her phone is not with her family. She's not communicating with anyone. Brian won't explain where she is. His family won't help locate her. Yet, at this point in time, Brian has not been charged with any crime because there's no evidence yet of what happened to Gabby, only that she's missing. Legally, Brian and his family have the right to remain silent under the Fifth Amendment. They cannot be compelled to make statements. This is a fundamental constitutional protection. However, ethically and morally, their refusal to provide any information about Gabby's whereabouts, even just the last place they were together, strikes most people as deeply wrong. A young woman is missing. Her family is desperate, and the last person with her won't even say where he last saw her. This behavior immediately raises massive red flags for investigators and for the public. Northport police begin their investigation. They impound Gabby's van from the laundry property and process it for evidence. They start piecing together the timeline of Gabby and Brian's trip through phone records, credit card usage, and social media posts. They start trying to figure out where Gabby was last seen and where she might be now. September 12, 2021. The story hits social media and local news. Gabby's family starts sharing information publicly, hoping to generate leads. They share photos of Gabby. They share information about her trip. They share that Brian has returned without her and is refusing to talk. The story starts gaining traction online. True crime communities on Reddit, TikTok, and Twitter begin discussing the case. People start analyzing Gabby's Instagram posts, looking for clues. The hashtag Find Gabby Petito starts trending. What happens next is unprecedented in missing persons cases. The case explodes on social media. Within days, Gabby's case becomes one of the most discussed missing person cases in the country. News outlets pick up the story nationally. Cable news networks begin covering it extensively. Gabby's Instagram posts are shared millions of times. Her YouTube channel sees a surge in views as people watch the van life videos she and Brian posted, looking for any hints of trouble or clues about what might have happened. Why did this case receive such massive attention? Several factors contributed. First, Gabby's active social media presence made her relatable to millions of followers and potential followers. She was documenting her life publicly. People felt like they knew her. Second, the van life angle connected with a huge online community of people who follow or participate in van life culture. Third, the bizarre circumstances of Brian's return and silence created a compelling mystery that captivated people. Fourth, the visual documentation of the trip, the photos, the videos, created a narrative that people could follow and analyze. And fifth, and this is important and uncomfortable, Gabby was a young, white, conventionally attractive woman. Research and advocacy groups have documented for years that missing persons cases involving white women, especially young, attractive white women, receive disproportionate media coverage compared to missing persons of color, missing men, missing LGBTQ individuals, missing elderly people, or missing persons who don't fit conventional beauty standards. This disparity is often referred to as missing white woman syndrome, a term that describes the media and public's tendency to focus extensively on these specific cases while largely ignoring thousands of other missing persons. As Gabby's case received wall-to-wall coverage, advocates for missing Indigenous women, missing Black women, and other marginalized missing persons used the moment to highlight this disparity. They pointed out that thousands of Indigenous women and girls are missing or murdered in the United States, many from the same general region where Gabby went missing, and receive virtually no media attention or investigative resources. The hashtag MMIW, which stands for Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women, trended alongside I Find Gabby Petito as advocates tried to draw attention to these other cases. This disparity is real and documented. According to data from organizations like the National Crime Information Center and advocacy groups, approximately 600,000 people are reported missing in the United States each year. The vast majority receive minimal to no media coverage. Only a small fraction of cases receive extensive coverage, and the cases that do receive coverage are disproportionately young white women. This doesn't mean Gabby's case didn't deserve attention. It absolutely did. But it raises important questions about whose lives are valued and whose disappearances are investigated with full resources. But let's continue with what happened next in Gabby's case. September 14th, 18th. The search for Gabby intensifies. Law enforcement begins focusing on Grand Teton National Park in Wyoming, based on Gabby's last known communications about heading to that area. The FBI joins the investigation. The case is now being treated as a potential homicide, though publicly officials are still calling it a missing person case. Search teams deploy to Grand Teton. The park is vast, over 300,000 acres of wilderness, mountains, forests, and remote areas. Finding one person in that expanse is extraordinarily difficult. Meanwhile, tips pour in from the public. People who saw the white van during the road trip report sightings. People analyze Gabby's final Instagram posts frame by frame, looking for location clues in the background of photos. Amateur internet sleuths use Google Earth and satellite imagery to try to identify exact locations from Gabby's posts. Some of this crowdsourced investigation actually provides useful information to law enforcement about where Gabby and Brian had been during their trip. One particularly helpful tip comes from a family who had been camping in Grand Teton. They had dashcam footage from their trip that captured Gabby's white van parked in a dispersed camping area near Spread Creek on August 27th. This narrows down the search area significantly. Investigators focused their search efforts on this region of the park. September 19, 2021, Sunday afternoon. FBI agents and search and rescue personnel searching the Spread Creek dispersed camping area in Grand Teton National Park make a discovery. In a remote camping spot, accessible by a rough dirt road off the main highway, they find human remains. The location is in a wooded area, partially concealed from view, in a spot where someone could camp away from other people. The remains are badly decomposed due to exposure to the elements for what appears to be several weeks. Initial visual identification is not possible. The FBI immediately secures the scene and calls in forensic specialists. The Teton County Coroner's Office is contacted. The remains are carefully documented, photographed, and recovered for autopsy and identification. September 21, 2021. The Teton County Coroner's Office confirms through dental records that the human remains found in Grand Teton National Park are those of Gabby Petito. The news is released publicly. Gabby's family is notified before the public announcement. The confirmation of Gabby's death ends any hope that she might be found alive. The case officially becomes a homicide investigation. The initial autopsy is performed. Teton County Coroner Dr. Brent Blue rules the manner of death as homicide. However, he does not immediately release the cause of death publicly, stating that further forensic analysis is needed. The area where Gabby's body was found is processed extensively for evidence. The exact condition of the body and the evidence collected at the scene are not released to the public to protect the integrity of the investigation and any future prosecution. October 12, 2021. 3 weeks after Gabby's body is found, Dr. Blue holds a press conference to release additional autopsy findings. He announces that the cause of Gabby's death was strangulation, specifically manual strangulation by human hands. He states that Gabby died approximately 3 to 4 weeks before her body was found, which places her death in late August, consistent with the timeline when her communications with her family stopped. Dr. Blue declines to provide additional specific details about the condition of the body or other forensic findings, citing the ongoing investigation. Strangulation is a particularly intimate and violent cause of death. It requires sustained physical contact, typically for several minutes, to cause death. It's often associated with domestic violence situations. The method of death strengthens the evidence that someone close to Gabby was responsible, not a random attack by a stranger. The FBI immediately names Brian Laundrie as a person of interest in Gabby's death. An arrest warrant is issued for Brian Laundrie. However, notably, the arrest warrant is not initially for murder. It's for unauthorized use of a debit card. According to the federal warrant, between August 30th and September 1st, Brian used a Capital One debit card that belonged to Gabby Petito and used her PIN to make ATM withdrawals and purchases totaling more than $1,000. This is a federal offense, unauthorized use of a device, and it gives law enforcement legal grounds to arrest Brian and hold him while the murder investigation continues. But there's a major problem. Brian Laundrie is missing. September 17th, 2021, 2 days before Gabby's body was found. But several days after the media attention on the case had become intense, Brian's parents, Christopher and Roberta Laundrie, contact Northport Police. They report that they have not seen their son Brian since September 14th, 3 days earlier. They claim Brian told them he was going for a hike in the Carlton Reserve, a 25,000-acre wilderness area and nature preserve near their home in Northport. They say he took his backpack and went hiking. He didn't return that evening. They waited to report him missing, they claim, because they thought he might be camping overnight in the reserve, which he had done before. The The timing of this report is immediately suspicious to investigators and the public. Brian's parents wait 3 days to report him missing. Their report comes just as the search for Gabby in Wyoming is intensifying and just before her body is found. It appears to many observers that Brian fled, and possibly that his parents gave him a head start before reporting him missing. However, no evidence has been made public that the parents knew what had happened to Gabby or that they actively helped Brian evade law enforcement. The Carlton Reserve becomes the focus of an intensive manhunt. The reserve is challenging terrain. It's a swampy, low-lying area with dense vegetation, standing water in many areas, and significant wildlife including alligators and venomous snakes. It's not easy terrain to search. Law enforcement deploys helicopters, drones, K-9 units, and ground search teams. The FBI joins the search. Days turn into weeks. Brian is not found in the reserve. The search expands beyond the Carlton Reserve. Tips come in from across the country of possible Brian sightings. Every tip has to be investigated. Someone thinks they saw him in North Carolina. Another report from Alabama. Another from Tennessee. None of the sightings are confirmed. Some are obvious cases of mistaken identity. Others are hoaxes or attention-seeking. But every tip requires resources to investigate because if Brian is on the run, any sighting could be legitimate. The public fascination with the case remains intense. Protesters gather outside the Laundrie family home in Northport. News cameras camp out on the street. The family is vilified online and in person. People are furious that Brian's parents won't provide more information. They're angry that Brian fled instead of facing justice. The Northport police have to station officers near the Laundrie home to prevent the situation from escalating into violence. But there's another ignored detail initially. While the search for Brian continues, more information comes out about the Moab police stop on August 12th. The Bodycam footage, which had been released publicly on September 16th as part of the missing person investigation, is now being analyzed in the context of Gabby's death. Domestic violence experts watch the footage and identify numerous red flags that the Moab officers missed or didn't properly assess. Dr. Katie Hood, CEO of the One Love Foundation, an organization dedicated to domestic violence prevention, reviewed the Bodycam footage publicly. She identified several concerning patterns. First, Gabby's extreme emotional distress compared to Brian's calm demeanor is consistent with a dynamic where one partner is being psychologically controlled and the other is the controller. In healthy relationship conflicts, both parties are typically upset. In abusive relationships, the abuser often remains calm while the victim is highly distressed because the abuser is in control of the situation. Second, Gabby's willingness to take all the blame for the conflict, her insistence that everything was her fault, her anxiety about Brian being upset with her, these are all signs of someone who has been conditioned to believe she's responsible for her partner's emotions and behavior. This is a classic pattern in emotionally abusive relationships. Third, the scratches on Brian's face and arms, which the officers focused on as evidence that Gabby was the aggressor, could actually be evidence of Gabby defending herself or trying to get away from Brian. In domestic violence situations, it's common for the victim to fight back. This is called reactive abuse. The abuser provokes and controls the situation. The victim finally reacts physically in self-defense or frustration, and then the abuser uses that reaction as evidence that the victim is the problem. Fourth, Brian's calm explanation and his ability to present himself as the reasonable, patient partner dealing with a crazy girlfriend. This is a common tactic used by abusers. They appear rational and in control to outsiders while privately creating an environment of control and fear for their partner. Gabby telling the officers about her OCD and anxiety, apologizing for her behavior, saying she has mental health issues. This could be Gabby internalizing the narrative that Brian had been feeding her, that she's the problem, that her mental health makes her difficult to deal with. Finally, several domestic violence experts noted that Gabby never actually explained what Brian did that led to her hitting him. She admitted she hit him, but she didn't explain the context. What was happening immediately before she hit him? Was he blocking her from leaving? Was he yelling in her face? Was he grabbing her? The officers didn't ask these questions. They focused on the fact that she hit him and he had scratches and concluded she was the aggressor. None of this analysis proves definitively what was happening in Gabby and Brian's relationship, but it raises serious questions about whether the Moab officers correctly assessed the situation. If Gabby was actually the victim of an escalating pattern of abuse, and if the officers had recognized that and intervened appropriately, could her death have been prevented? Moab City conducted an independent review of the August 12th incident. The review was performed by an outside consulting firm that specializes in law enforcement practices. The report was completed and released in January 2022, months after Gabby's death. The findings were damning. The review found that the responding officers made several critical errors. First, they did not properly classify the incident as domestic violence under Utah law. Utah law specifically defines domestic violence as any assault or threat between family or household members, which includes individuals in a dating relationship. The incident clearly met this definition. By classifying it as a mental health crisis instead, the officers failed to follow mandatory domestic violence protocols. Second, the officers did not conduct a proper lethality assessment. Utah law enforcement is trained to use a lethality assessment tool in domestic violence situations to determine the risk level. Questions include, has the violence been escalating? Is there access to weapons? Has there been strangulation in the past? Are there threats of harm? The officers did not conduct this assessment. Third, the officers did not properly determine who was the primary aggressor. Under Utah law, when determining the primary aggressor in a domestic violence situation, officers are supposed to consider not just who committed the physical act, but the history of the relationship, who is in fear, who was acting in self-defense, and the potential for future harm. The officers focused almost exclusively on Gabby's admission that she hit Brian and the visible scratches on him. They didn't adequately consider the broader context. Fourth, Utah law requires that in domestic violence, situations where probable cause exists, an arrest must be made. The review found that based on the evidence available, probable cause did exist to make an arrest for domestic violence. The officers had discretion to decide who to arrest if they determined who was the primary aggressor, but they should have made an arrest. By not doing so, they violated policy. The review made several recommendations. The Moab Police Department should provide additional and ongoing training on domestic violence recognition, particularly on identifying patterns of coercive control and psychological abuse that may not leave physical evidence. Officers should be trained specifically on how to identify when a victim is minimizing abuse or taking blame for an abuser's behavior. The department should review its policies on responding to domestic violence calls to ensure compliance with Utah law. The review stopped short of saying definitively that Gabby's death could have been prevented if the officers had handled the August 12th incident differently. However, it acknowledged that proper intervention in domestic violence situations can save lives. The report stated that the mishandling of this incident represented a missed opportunity for intervention. The families of both Gabby and the officers involved have been affected by this. Gabby's family has publicly stated their belief that if the officers had properly recognized Gabby as a victim of domestic violence that day and had taken appropriate action, Gabby might still be alive. The officers themselves, especially Officer Robbins, who spent the most time talking with Gabby, have reportedly expressed regret and second-guessing about their decisions that day. It's a tragedy on multiple levels. But let's return to the search for Brian Laundrie. October 2021. The search for Brian continues. Weeks have passed since he disappeared. The Carlton Reserve has been searched extensively with no results. The FBI is coordinating a nationwide manhunt. Brian's face is everywhere in the media. He's one of the most recognizable people in America at this point. How is it possible he hasn't been found? Speculation runs wild. Some people believe Brian's parents helped him flee the country. Some believe he's hiding in an underground bunker or remote cabin. Some believe he's receiving help from friends or other family members. Some believe he's alive and on the run. Others believe he's dead, either by suicide or accident. The theories are endless, and the lack of any confirmed sightings only fuels more speculation. Then on October 20th, 2021, there's a break in the case. October 20th morning. Christopher and Roberta Laundrie, Brian's parents, go to the Carlton Reserve with law enforcement present. They go to an area of the reserve called the Myakkahatchee Creek Environmental Park, which connects to the larger Carlton Reserve. This area had been underwater during much of the previous search efforts due to flooding, but water levels had recently receded. In an area very close to one of the entrance paths, the Laundrie parents find some personal items belonging to Brian: a dry bag, a backpack. These items are in an area that had previously been underwater. Law enforcement searches the immediate area more thoroughly. They find human remains, partial skeletal remains. The location is less than a mile from the entrance to the park, in an area that thousands of searchers had passed through. But the remains had been concealed by water and vegetation during earlier searches. The remains are recovered and sent to the medical examiner for identification. October 21st, the FBI confirms through dental records that the remains are those of Brian Laundrie. The cause of death is later determined to be a self-inflicted gunshot wound to the head. A firearm is recovered near the remains. The decomposition and wildlife activity had reduced the remains to mostly skeletal, consistent with approximately 5 weeks of exposure in the Florida environment. Along with Brian's remains, investigators find his backpack. Inside the backpack is a notebook. The notebook is water-damaged but partially readable. The notebook contains writings from Brian. The specific contents of the notebook were not immediately released to the public, but FBI officials confirmed the notebook contained written statements relevant to Gabby's death. On January 21, 2022, 3 months after Brian's body was found, the FBI officially closed the investigation into Gabby Petito's death. The FBI's Denver division released a statement summarizing their findings. The statement confirmed that the FBI had conducted an extensive investigation into Gabby's disappearance and death. Investigators had reviewed numerous witness statements, forensic evidence, and other materials. They had analyzed Brian Laundrie's notebook. The statement confirmed what everyone already believed. Brian Laundrie murdered Gabby Petito. The notebook contained Brian's confession to killing Gabby. While the exact text of the confession was not released publicly, officials stated that Brian's writings in the notebook claimed responsibility for Gabby's death. The FBI's statement noted that with Brian deceased, no criminal charges could be filed, and the investigation was considered closed from a federal law enforcement perspective. The Laundrie family, through their attorney, later released a portion of Brian's notebook. The released pages show Brian claiming he killed Gabby out of mercy because she was injured and in pain following some kind of incident. He claimed he was ending her suffering. Experts and investigators immediately questioned this narrative. The autopsy showed Gabby died by strangulation, which is not consistent with a mercy killing. Strangulation is a violent, intimate, and prolonged method of killing that requires several minutes of sustained pressure. Brian's writings appeared to be an attempt to justify or rationalize his actions, rather than an honest account. Here's what investigative files won't tell you about the broader implications and aftermath. Gabby's family filed a wrongful death lawsuit against Brian Laundrie's estate because Brian's death was by suicide and he left no will. His estate, which included any assets he owned, became subject to legal claims. Gabby's family sought damages for the wrongful death of their daughter. The lawsuit was eventually settled, though the terms of the settlement were not disclosed publicly. More controversially, Gabby's family also filed a lawsuit against Christopher and Roberta Laundrie, Brian's parents, and their attorney Stephen Bertolino. The lawsuit alleged that Brian's parents knew Gabby was dead and knew where her body was located, but they refused to provide this information to Gabby's family or law enforcement while Gabby's family was desperately searching for her. The lawsuit claimed this caused intentional infliction of emotional distress. The basis for this allegation came from the timeline and certain statements. Brian returned to Florida on September 1st. Gabby's family was desperately trying to reach anyone in the Laundrie family for information between September 1st and September 11th, when they filed the missing person report. The Laundries remained silent. The lawsuit alleged that during this time, the Laundrie parents knew Gabby was dead because Brian had told them. The Laundrie family vigorously denied these allegations. Their attorney argued that they had no knowledge of Gabby's death until it was reported publicly, and that they were simply following legal advice not to speak to anyone about the case. The civil lawsuit has been proceeding through the court system. In November 2024, a federal judge ruled that the lawsuit could proceed to trial, denying the laundry's motion to dismiss. As of this recording, the case has not yet gone to trial, but it remains active in the court system. Beyond the legal proceedings, Gabby's family has dedicated themselves to advocacy work in her memory. In November 2021, Gabby's mother, Nicole Schmidt, and her stepfather, Jim Schmidt, established the Gabby Petito Foundation. The foundation's mission is to provide resources, education, and support related to missing persons and domestic violence. The foundation works to help families of missing persons navigate the search process, provides financial assistance for search efforts, and supports domestic violence prevention and awareness programs. The foundation has specifically focused on helping families of missing persons who don't receive the media attention and resources that Gabby's case received. This is a direct acknowledgement of the disparity in missing persons coverage. Gabby's family has been open about recognizing that their daughter's case received extraordinary attention and resources, and they want to use that platform to help families whose cases are ignored. The case also led to legislative efforts. In Wyoming, where Gabby was killed, legislators introduced the Gabby Petito Act. The proposed law would require law enforcement to more quickly share information about missing persons cases with the public and media. The idea is that faster dissemination of information could lead to quicker resolutions and potentially save lives in cases where the missing person is still alive. Similar proposals have been discussed in other states. The case intensified national conversations about domestic violence, particularly about how to recognize warning signs and how to intervene effectively. Domestic violence organizations reported increased demand for their services and resources in the months following Gabby's death, suggesting that the case prompted many people to reassess their own relationships or relationships of people they know. The case also highlighted the phenomenon of intimate partner homicide, a specific category of domestic violence where the violence escalates to murder. According to data from the Bureau of Justice Statistics, intimate partners commit approximately 1,500 homicides per year in the United States. Women are far more likely to be victims of intimate partner homicide than men. Approximately 55% of female homicide victims are killed by intimate partners, compared to about 5% of male homicide victims. Gabby's case brought this issue into mainstream awareness. Another significant impact was on the van life and travel vlogging community. Many young people who were living the van life or planning to do so reconsidered their safety, particularly women traveling alone or with partners. The case shattered the idealistic social media portrayal of van life as carefree adventure. It highlighted the realities that living in close quarters with someone, being isolated from support systems, and the challenges of recognizing when a relationship has become dangerous. The case also demonstrated the power and problems of social media in criminal investigations. On one hand, social media played a crucial role in generating tips, identifying locations, and ultimately helping to find Gabby. The crowdsourcing of information from the public provided valuable leads to investigators. On the other hand, the case also showed the dark side of internet sleuthing. Innocent people were harassed and accused based on speculation. The Laundrie family's home became a protest site. Vigilante justice was discussed openly online. The case illustrated that while public engagement can help, it can also cause significant harm when not channeled appropriately. Finally, the case brought renewed attention to missing white woman syndrome and the need for equitable attention to all missing persons. During the height of coverage of Gabby's case, advocates pointed out the cases of missing indigenous women like Gabby Petito was found in Wyoming. During the search for Gabby, other missing person cases in the same region included Kylan Schulte and Crystal Turner, a married couple who were found shot to death near Moab, Utah, on August 18, 2021, just days after Gabby and Brian's police stop in the same town. Their case received some attention, but nowhere near the level of Gabby's. Numerous missing Native American women in Montana, Wyoming, and other western states. Cases that receive minimal law enforcement resources and virtually no media attention, despite the FBI's own data, showing that Native American women are murdered at a rate 10 times the national average. Jalagia Finclea, a 13-year-old indigenous girl from the Mashpee Wampanoag tribe, who went missing in October 2021, during the height of the Gabby Petito media coverage. Her case received minimal national attention. Lauren L. Cho, a 30-year-old woman who went missing in California around the same time as Gabby. Her case initially received little attention, though her family and advocates worked to raise awareness by directly comparing the disparate coverage to Gabby's case. The point advocates were making was not that Gabby's case shouldn't receive attention, but that all these cases should receive attention. The response to a missing person should not depend on their race, gender, appearance, or social media following. Every missing person deserves resources. Every family deserves answers. We're not saying that Gabby's family did anything wrong by seeking attention for her case. They were doing what any family would do, using every tool available to find their daughter. We're not saying the media shouldn't have covered her case. It was a newsworthy story with compelling elements. What we are saying is that the system is broken when attention and resources are distributed so unequally. Officially, the criminal investigation into Gabby Petito's death is closed. Brian Laundrie murdered her. Brian Laundrie is dead. No criminal charges can be filed. The case is resolved from a law enforcement perspective. The civil litigation continues. The advocacy work continues. The conversations about domestic violence, missing persons, and media coverage continue. But we've reached a point where we must examine what this case teaches us about the systems that failed Gabby and continue to fail countless others. A domestic violence incident was documented on Bodycam, but misidentified and mishandled. A young woman expressed clear distress and took blame for her partner's behavior, classic signs of an abusive relationship, but officers didn't recognize it. A missing person report was delayed because the family couldn't get basic information from the people who knew where she was. And massive investigative resources were deployed only after the case became a media sensation, raising questions about the thousands of cases that never receive that attention. Here's what we know from the complete public record. Gabby Petito and Brian Laundrie embarked on a cross-country road trip in July 2021. They documented their journey on social media. On August 12, 2021, they had a domestic dispute in Moab, Utah that was documented on police body cam. The officers separated them for a night but made no arrest and did not properly classify the incident as domestic violence. Gabby's communications with her family became sporadic and then stopped in late August. Brian returned to Florida alone on September 1, 2021. Brian and his family refused to provide any information about Gabby's whereabouts. Gabby was reported missing on September 11th. Her body was found in Grand Teton National Park on September 19th. She died by strangulation, ruled a homicide. Brian Laundrie was named a person of interest. Brian disappeared and was found dead by suicide on October 20th. A notebook found with his remains contained his confession to killing Gabby. The FBI closed the investigation in January 2022, with Brian Laundrie identified as the person responsible for Gabby's death. Current status of various aspects of the case. Criminal investigation closed. No charges possible. Suspect deceased. Civil wrongful death lawsuit against Brian Laundrie's estate settled. Civil lawsuit against Brian's parents, ongoing as of late 2024, set to go to trial. Moab Police Department review, completed, found officer errors but no criminal misconduct. Gabby Petito Foundation, active, providing resources for missing persons and domestic violence prevention. Legislative efforts, ongoing in multiple states to improve missing persons procedures. Media and public awareness. The case remains a reference point for discussions about domestic violence, missing persons coverage, and the role of social media in investigations. What we learned from this case: domestic violence is not always obvious. Psychological and emotional abuse often precedes physical violence. Victims often minimize abuse and take blame for their abuser's behavior. Law enforcement needs better training to recognize these dynamics. Bystanders and family members need to understand warning signs. Intervention at early stages can save lives, but it requires recognizing what's actually happening rather than accepting surface explanations. Missing persons cases require immediate action and aggressive investigation. Waiting for someone to show up is not an acceptable strategy when there are obvious red flags. Partners who refuse to cooperate in a missing person investigation should be treated as priority suspects from the start. Media coverage of missing persons is deeply unequal and reflects broader societal biases about whose lives matter. This disparity in attention translates directly to disparity in investigative resources and outcomes. Social media can be a powerful tool for generating leads and public awareness, but it must be managed appropriately to prevent harassment and false accusations. What remains to be determined. The civil trial against Brian's parents will determine whether they knew Gabby was dead and withheld that information. This could have implications for family members' responsibilities in criminal situations. The long-term impact of this case on law enforcement training and missing persons protocols will unfold over years. Whether the legislative efforts inspired by this case will be implemented effectively remains to be seen. Whether the conversations about equitable missing persons coverage will translate into actual systemic changes is unknown. What's at stake? Every year, approximately 600,000 people are reported missing in the United States. Every year, approximately 1,500 people are killed by intimate partners. These are not abstract statistics. These are real people, real families, real tragedies. Gabby Petito's case showed us that even with social media documentation, eyewitness reports, police contact, and eventually massive investigative resources, a young woman still died at the hands of her partner. If this can happen in a case with all these elements, what hope is there for the thousands of cases that have none of these advantages? The answer is that we have to do better. We have to train law enforcement to recognize domestic violence in all its forms. We have to create systems where missing persons are treated urgently, regardless of who they are. We have to fund investigations adequately. We have to pay attention to all missing persons, not just the ones who look a certain way or have large social media followings. We have to believe victims when they tell us something is wrong, even when they're trying to convince themselves everything is fine. Gabby Petito should be alive. She should be 25 years old right now. She should be pursuing her dreams, whatever those might have been, beyond van life vlogging. Her family should be celebrating holidays with her, not managing a foundation in her memory. The fact that she's not alive is a failure of multiple systems and a tragedy that should drive us to do better. Here's the question we must continue asking and working to answer. How do we create a society where Gabby Petito's warning signs are recognized and acted upon? How do we ensure that every missing person, regardless of race, gender, appearance, or social media presence, receives the urgent attention and resources they deserve? How do we prevent the next Gabby Petito? Because there will be another case like this, unless we make fundamental changes to how we handle domestic violence and missing persons. The question is whether we have the will to make those changes. If this case made you think about systemic problems in how we handle domestic violence and missing persons, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe. We're covering cases that expose gaps in our systems and the desperate need for change. Drop a comment about what you think should change in how law enforcement handles domestic violence situations. What should those officers in Moab have done differently? What should Brian's parents have been required to do? What should the media do differently in covering missing persons? Share this video with anyone who wants to understand how we can prevent future tragedies like Gabby Petito's death. Because awareness is the first step toward change, but change requires action. And that action starts with all of us demanding better from our systems and from ourselves.